My fucking rocks are just. Oh, okay.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Soggy eggs Benedict. That's the new game taking over the nation. The frat houses everywhere.
Yeah. Can you make a good eggs Benedict? Do you think?
It's okay. It's nothing special, but you get
But
those
it's not
pre-made
bad.
Canadian bacon slices, and you just put
Oh,
that on the bottom, and
Yes.
it's pretty good.
I got a breakfast sandwich maker as well that once in a while I use, where you throw the English muffin in there, crack the egg on the top, throw the cheese in with the what you want, pork roll, you want Canadian bacon, whatever. Throw it in, you close it, you let it cook for 3 minutes. You slide the one thing over, the egg falls on top of it with the other side of the English muffin, and it just slides right out.
Turning your co-host on early in the morning. Let's go.
Dude,
It's beautiful.
pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. I don't
Sounds
use it all
solid.
that often, but when I do, I'm I'm pleased with the results. Anyway, hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Stochastic.com NFL Marathon Matchup Strategy Show. It's Thursday at 11 a.m., so you know what that means. Load up on provisions. Get your stuff ready, whether it's an IV or your MR, whatever it is. Make sure you're ready to rock. We got a long show ahead of us, but I promise you, once you're done with this one, you're going to be set going all the way up to Sunday. Going to be in good shape. If you don't have a ton of time throughout the week, and this is the only show you can watch, you're in good hands. We got you covered. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafay_D on the X, baby. LOUGHY_D, joined by Eric Lindquist at Eric Lindquist. Give the man a follow. Me as well while you're over there. We can chop it up on the X, talk some fun stuff. What's going on, brother?
Normally just shenanigans over on the
Yeah.
X from time to time, try to troll people. You're a master at it. I feel like Adam is the master at it.
I don't go out
I'm
of my
getting
way
better.
to do it. Adam goes out of his way to do it.
That's true. He goes finding trouble.
Yeah.
We have trouble coming to us, and then we instigate.
Dude, he'll DM me stuff of like, look at this idiot. And I'll be like, oh, I wonder what that is. Someone that responded to him. And I'll look and the person has, by the way, I'm not follower shaming. My point is like, it wasn't an industry guy or anything. It'll be someone that signed up like 2 days ago that has no followers and likely just did it to come after Adam. And he's like, yeah, got him, which I don't know.
In all fairness, that seems like fun when you think about it.
Yeah. Listen, social media is a hellscape. I don't think there's any denying that. For all of the good it has brought us much bad as well.
Much bad.
And Adam totally embraces the bad.
Yep. I was gonna say, for you have kids, and you're gonna be developing them, and they're gonna grow up in an era that's just insane. The stuff that's gonna be coming down the pipeline in the next 5-10 years.
Scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, it scares the shit out of me too. As we're starting to talk about having kids and things like that, it's wild. But like, then you think about an Adam out there. Adam's equipped for this kind of shit. Like Adam is truly, if it truly goes straight up AI, I feel like he's going to be able to have quipping battles with AI and be able to figure out his place in their new world, and he'll be just fine.
What if Adam ends up having kids?
God help us all. God help us all.
I think
he probably has a kid.
I think
for being honest.
I think he'd be a good pops. I think he'd do an all right job.
You would be like bad Santa doing like fatherhood.
All right. Who would be a more interesting dad to be a fly on the wall and watch them? Adam, Josh, or Ben?
Oh my gosh. That might be the best question.
That's a good question.
Right? Ever posed. All right. First instinct is Ben, because I want to see Ben's normal day to day anyway. The stuff that he does and the amount of Ukrainian soccer that he's betting at 3 a.m. is disturbing as it is. It's beautiful too. It's beautiful. But like, I feel like Josh is the right answer between the three of them, because like Josh would have to change a lot of things to his life and routine, whereas I don't think Adam would. And then Ben, I don't think he would. I would want to watch Josh, I think, the most.
I think Josh would adjust the most easily to it, even though he'd have to change a lot up. Although it'd be tough because Katie's out of town all the time too. That'd be tough. I could see. I tell Jordan Klein all the time, Jordan's going to be a good dad. I'm telling you, he's got it. Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah, you have a rich aunt. Everything's fine.
Oh, don't do that. Let's talk
He's
some
laughing.
football.
It's fine.
Happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the channel. Help us on our steep climb to 100,000 subs. All you guys who have been subscribed have been with us a while and help us build this channel and everything over the years. Greatly appreciative of all of that, for real. And if not, atone for your sins here on a Thursday morning. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. That stuff that goes does not go overlooked. Try and at the very least read all the comments. Try and respond to them as well. And if you want to listen in podcast form, two things, guys. You know this. All of our shows are available on podcast form. You know you can close your phones, listen to them if you're maybe not a YouTube Premium member or whatever. All that stuff probably helps, especially on drives to work, commutes, whatever. But we also have podcast exclusive content that does not come out on YouTube. We do short 25, 30-minute podcasts. We got the single game 3-max strategy show every Tuesday with Ben Rossett and myself. Greg Ehrenberg and I break down the afternoon slate on Friday. Set a reminder in your phone for Sunday afternoons if things go sour to start listening to that. It's quick. It'll get you in and out in 25 minutes and ready to build lineups. So all of our podcast exclusive stuff is over on the podcast platform, along with everything that we do here as well. Love to have you guys come over there, check it out, subscribe to the pod, leave a rating or review. Let's get into it. We got 12 games, a lot of big spreads. One of the biggest spreads is not on this slate, 10.5-point spread tonight between the Niners and the Giants. We'll have live before lock for that. Matt Kajeski and I already did the strategy show. But then you have a 12.5 for the Packers. Okay, or I'm sorry, the Chiefs against the Chicago Bears, and that organization seems to be going through some heavy turbulence right now. I won't say the rumors because those type of allegations, if proven not untrue, would be bad. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about here?
I have no clue what you're talking about, actually.
Oh, really?
No. Well, I saw the Justin Fields comments. I saw
No. So their defensive coordinator yesterday.
Oh, I did hear a little bit about that.
Promptly resigned, right?
I heard a little bit about that, yeah.
And it turns out that his home was raided. And then they said
I didn't know that I heard it was a rumor that it had gotten raided. I didn't hear that it was an official thing that happened.
The false rumor apparently was that the Bears practice or, like their main headquarters got raided. They're saying that didn't happen. But the rumor out there. All right, let me ask you this. I have no idea. It's completely unsubstantiated, so I'm not going to lead to this. But the ongoing rumor out there, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't already know. Why would you go into somebody's house and, take computers?
Gotcha. Yep. Totally makes sense. Yep. So, now we know where we're going. Yep.
Exactly. So, but who knows? We don't know that. That's a fucked up accusation if it's not true. And if it is true, put him in the Iron Maiden and let him rot. But what I'm saying is Chicago already going through some rough stuff. 12.5-point dogs. Not to mention, they've looked terrible to start the season. Forget all of the outside external stuff. They've looked terrible. Then you've got another huge spread in the what's the other game with the huge spread? Dallas, 12.5 against Arizona. Couple of other
Jaguars
games
are 9.5-point favorites too.
Yep. 8.5, 9 points in that one. Baltimore 7.5-point favorites. Miami 6.5. Buffalo 6.5. Although I think Washington hangs in that game. We can talk about it. But anyway, what's up?
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that.
Oh yeah, you guys are right. How did I forget about? Did you know that Peanut Tillman is an FBI agent?
What?
And apparently he was on the team investigating this. From what I heard, he was actually in on the raid. Mind you, former Bears great.
What?
Yeah. That
is insane. Oh, I feel like I missed some stuff yesterday. Obviously, it was popping around the X, the Twitters. I saw stuff here and there about it, but I didn't delve into that kind of. When I get ready for this show, I generally get done recording my MLB stuff, and then I go blank for 2 hours, and all I do is listen to podcasts, and I put my devices on airplane mode, and I just kind of comb through my favorite numbers that I pull up onto a sheet and just kind of go through to kind of prepare for it. feel like then I just close everything down and go to bed. I must have missed something insane last night.
This happened in the afternoon, like early afternoon.
Yeah, that's wild.
Justin said that's also false. And now people are saying there's no rage. So who the hell knows what happened at this point?
I heard it was like a rumor that it happened, but
Tillman is in the FBI though. That is not false.
It's insane.
Also, I'm doing a strategy show for DFS. Please take nothing I say seriously. Serious. The Chandler Jones stuff is wild too. Him saying his account got hacked after going on all that wild rant. I don't know. You look. If nothing else, the whole Alan Williams things is very weird. So
chalk up Justin Fields for 40 fantasy points this weekend. That's what we're getting at. Come from behind mode, complete, just reckless abandon, 150 rushing, something like that.
Yeah, we'll see. It's definitely possible. Talk to me about Denver and Miami as we dive into this one. You've got, so you have a Denver team that is essentially broken still. They put points up last game. That's great. Wilson had his first 300-yard passing performance since week 1 of 2022 against his former Seattle team. And to be fair, he had 258 yards and 2 touchdowns before that wild Hail Mary was somehow converted for 50 yards. So that added 50 yards and a touchdown as well. So for whatever that's worth, right? But Miami is a good team and they have a good offense. Jalen Waddle's questionable though with a concussion. We know how concussions have damaged this team's reputation a little bit last year with the Tua stuff. They've been cautious with other guys. You can go back, you can look, like there were 2 players, Teron Armstead, and I forget who else it was. They wanted to play last week and they told him no. They've been cautious. So I don't know about Waddle's status here. Tyreek Hill was limited, but I would assume he plays. What are you doing with the Denver Broncos though against this Miami team this week after what we've seen through the first 2 weeks?
Well, Russell Wilson, from a fantasy perspective, kind of nuked it towards the end of last game. I mean, ended up north of 30 fantasy points in come from behind mode, a lot of big plays. I think the big question is like what we think about Marvin Mims being inserted into this offense in an actual probable way, but it feels a little bit reminiscent of like Deshaun Jackson slates once upon a time that I know you're familiar with, but Marvin Mims getting there on no volume. We're talking 2 targets. Goes completely nuts, then takes a rushing attempt to the house. I don't know if you can really keep him down in terms of snap count after what we've seen from him compared to Johnson or Humphrey there, but he's projecting out like nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's just big playability that you saw from there. Otherwise, I just feel like Denver's a very unappealing team. Jared Jeudy back into the mix, Cortland Sutton back into the mix, Pirine and Williams doing exactly what we kind of expected them to be doing, to split all of the snaps there at the running back spot. Hard to really have any kind of a preference. 5,500 for Williams seems like a spot that people will land a little bit in tournaments because of what that upside could be, but I don't find it to be a very appealing football team to get to on this slate at all.
Neither do I. Like Devontae clearly outworked or out touched Pirine in the ground last game, but you didn't see a whole lot there. I'm with you. I think there are a lot of other good spots to look at, and also spots that might not be all that popular either. When it comes to Denver, also, do we agree Miami's defense, they look pretty good and they're getting good pressure. Who was it that punched that ball out on Sunday night? It was one of the most, I texted my buddy the video and he's like, yeah, they're going to show that in football camps for years to come, where he comes flying in, you can see the punch outs coming, but he simultaneously wraps him up, forces the fumble, takes him to the ground. They're playing good football, not just on offense, but on defense as well. So I like Miami. Miami defense, I don't even think is a crazy play in a game like this. But on the offensive side, what do you make of Denver's? Well, on Miami's offensive side, what do you make of the fact that Denver in week 1 against the Raiders held them to 17 points, then got lit up by Howell and the Commanders at home to lose that game? You score 30 plus points, you should be winning every time if you're that Denver team.
You would think so, but I also think what we saw week 1 was some of the cobwebs for Sam Howell against Arizona, kind of a fluky pick 6 situation there towards the end of that first half. I loved the bounce back. I loved
I mean, Hal
seeing them
played the whole
open up
damn
that.
preseason.
I know, but I'm saying that the Cobwebs, in terms of as a starter, he ended up having the one game that he played at the end of last season.
Sure.
And, you come in, now you're the guy on the team, maybe a little bit of a different situation, but I was kind of willing to overlook that. We've also seen Arizona's pass rush maybe be the only good facet of what they're capable of doing, getting after Daniel Jones in that first half. And then, things opened up. Things opened up in the second half a little bit. But Sam Howell, 39 pass attempts, felt pretty good about what he was able to do. And we'll cover him later. But for Miami, going up against Denver here, it's just a question of Jalen Waddle. If he's going to be out, it's going to be very interesting to see where the chalk lands between Berrios. Craycraft, I thought, played really, really well week 1 against the Chargers, and then just kind of went by the wayside. So it's strange to me that he wasn't on the field a little bit more based on some of those week 1 results. But Jalen Waddle, obviously the big deal there. And then, the Denver side, they should be winning every single game that you're talking about when they put up 30 plus because of what that defense is. But I think that just kind of speaks to the fact that, there's some stuff every single week in the NFL, especially in the early season. We're still kind of figuring out the identities of these football teams and what they're going to be and who they're going to be. I think Denver might just be a bad football team, and playing from behind against Miami, probably a good thing from a fantasy perspective. And I think we got to be adjusting that in there where Tyreek Hill, Waddle, they go completely nuke a slate. You're going to need something on the way back more than likely, because Russell Wilson's going to be chucking it like he was towards the end of that game on Sunday. So it's an unappealing team outside of a run back from the Denver side for me. And then Miami, God, it's going to be a lot of pieces that you have interest in here.
You like Mostert?
Yeah, I do.
And Salvin Ahmed may be out as well. So they don't really have anybody in that backfield.
Yeah, it's
other than Devon A-Chain, and he's not.
Who they didn't want to play.
Exactly.
That was kind of the strange thing to me. I thought over the course of Sunday, that was one of the main key points was like, what are you going to do? In year longs, like Raheem Mostert, he felt like, you were starting him like a year long there, but with A-Chain active, I was just curious what that workload was going to look like. Felt like he was a good play for the single game showdown slate, where he ended up being like 4 or 5% owned, but he played 6 snaps. So everybody just kind of knew what I didn't. I thought it was going to be a pretty unpredictable spot there. He's been a very dynamic running back at the college level. They've been excited about him from all reports, but can't be that excited if he's only playing 6 snaps here. But without Ahmed out there, it creates another question mark. Do they go to some Ingold in some spots? But Raheem Mostert playing a massive line share of this, going up against a Denver team that they should be able to get after in some capacity there based on what we saw against Washington. And Mostert's still only 6K. Hard to run into a guy who's playing like 70, 80, 90% of snaps at 6K and not have interest.
Absolutely. Favorite plays from this game before we move on?
Tyreek Hill, 1. Yep. Pretty clear cut for me, him, Tua. Jalen Waddle, if he ends up playing, he'll have that Q tag going all the way up until lock. I would assume we'll hear the reports the night before whether or not he's leaning towards playing or not. Doesn't feel like a true game time decision. He will either be in or out, and that'll be pretty clear cut because of concussion protocol. I would say Waddle, though, 7,500 seems expensive, but I would love some Tua doubles. Trying to put some Smythe into my life as well. How about this guy? Now 10 targets through 2 weeks. Not exactly a bad allotment, sub 3K, sitting at 2,900. I think he could play a ton of snaps again here. So probably, it's weird to say, everybody on the Miami side of the ball. And then Denver, it's just, do I want to force back a run back here or there? Marvin Mims, I still don't think is going to see the field enough, so I'm not going to get box score enchanted or anything there. Probably just, I guess, Javonte Williams, probably my favorite from the Denver side, but almost no interest there either.
Yeah, Sutton's cheap, but
yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. Maybe one of those guys, you're right. If they go down early, they're going to have to throw, but that's just throwing darts at this point. Exactly. Colts and Ravens, 45-point total. Ravens 7.5-point home favorites against the Colts. Anthony Richardson didn't practice yesterday. Of course, this is on Thursday if you guys are watching later in the week. Anthony Richardson didn't practice yesterday. I don't know if he's going to practice today with that concussion. Wouldn't be surprised if it's Gardner Minshew. He looked good against the Texans, but at the same time, we know who Gardner Minshew is. He's nothing special. He's fine. He's a good backup, but he's a backup. You look at this offense. Look, you would assume that Pittman continues to see a lot of opportunities, so there's that. Baltimore's dealing with injuries on both sides of the ball, but Justice Hill might miss. Odell Beckham said he's not going to miss any time, but he didn't practice yesterday, so I think today's practice report will be very enlightening. My only thing here is if you're looking at this and going, yeah, Justice Hill doesn't play, I it's so nerve-wracking for me to think that it just becomes the Gus Edwards show, because Gus Edwards wasn't exactly out touching Justice Hill significantly, actually wasn't out touching Justice Hill at all after J.K. Dobbins went down. So does Melvin Gordon become more involved? They just signed, who'd they sign? Kenyon Drake or somebody?
Yep.
It's one of these guys. Was it Drake that they brought back?
Well, I mean, Melvin Gordon's been there for a while. I didn't see anything about Drake. Drake was like rumored to be with the Indianapolis Colts at some point in time. I can't even remember when that was. Be wrong. Yeah. For me, it really is just as much as like
they signed Drake back.
Okay. That creates just another reason to not be playing a 5,300 Gus Edwards. This is not like last week on this show where we talked about the Colts side, and I just said Zach Moss relative to ownership was my favorite running back play. Luckily, stayed with a little bit come Sunday. I brought it down a little bit from where I was anticipating because it felt a little riskier with some of the other plays. Of course, wish I ended up jamming it the way I was anticipating on this show last Thursday. But looking at the Baltimore side, it's so diluted. We know that they're willing to air it out now a little bit more with Lamar Jackson. You got Zay Flowers emerging, Rashad Bateman. If Odell Beckham ends up being out, Nelson Aguilar took on a decent enough snap share there, 25 snaps all in that second half there with Odell Beckham out. Looked pretty decent out on the field, which I know probably tilts every Eagles fan because it's Nelson Aguilar. But overall with this game in particular, if you don't have Anthony Richardson, it takes away such a ceiling performance. He was on pace for 25, 30, 35 against Houston there. And now it becomes Gardner Minshew, who is 5,100, does give you access to a build where it can be a Brock Purdy type build that we had from last week, where you get some of the cheapies, and it's more about what you're able to build around him. But I feel like in modern NFL, we still want to have some of those super ceilings. We still want to prioritize them. No way Gardner Minshew into Baltimore is a phenomenal spot that I would want to be overweight to by any means, but just decent enough there. And then on the Baltimore side with the running game, no Justice Hill. That would create maybe a reason to get to a little bit of Gus Edwards. If he suits up, it's extremely diluted, but I'll have to be extremely sensitive to ownership on Gus Edwards because they still will just give work to any running back who's available.
I think they will too. And I think Drake gets elevated from the practice squad if Hill is out. That would only make sense, right? So Justin, what's up, Justin? Said Drake and Gordon are bad. I like Gus Bus. They are bad, but you know, he only saw 10 carries last game. And Justice Hill saw 11 carries with 3 targets. I'm just not overly convinced that this is going to be a bell cow opportunity. I think it's nice that Gus Edwards got that goal line work and scored. That's good. But I'm with you. This is entirely ownership dependent. As a 7.5 point favorites, if Hill is out and Gus Edwards ends up being very low owned, and Jerome Ford is super popular, I will definitely look to some Gus Edwards as a big favorite at home, without question. Because Jerome Ford, let's not ignore the fact that he's going up against a legitimate pass funnel defense in Tennessee.
Yeah, it's something that we're going to talk about a lot leading up to lock. He's 4,800, Jerome Ford. It's going to be a main centerpiece of this slate of what we believe for Tennessee to be. I wish I had pulled the trigger on just a global swap. I ended up being able to incorporate Kyron Williams at 5K alongside Joshua Kelly 5K. If I had just multi-swapped everything across the board, it could have been an absolute cleaning fest on Sunday, but still a really good Sunday for me. And part of it was just getting a little bit lower on Joshua Kelly as a result of having Kyron Williams show up with the Cam Akers inactive news that came out 10 minutes before lock of the first set of games. So Jerome Ford going up against a team giving up 65 rushing yards per game. I think he's probably better than Joshua Kelly. I think he's probably better and equipped because he catches passes, probably more equipped to put up fantasy points against Tennessee than a Jamal Williams was in week 1 as pretty pronounced chalk. So I think it's a little bit more nuanced with Jerome Ford this week than what it has been the previous 2 weeks, but no doubt about it. If you're expecting any kind of running volume in that spot, it's dicey to say the least.
Yeah, I think he might be better, but I don't know if we can really say for sure. I mean, Joshua Kelly was coming off a really nice game going into that Tennessee matchup and was just terrible. Plus
no
Deshaun,
involvement in the passing game too. That was,
I
mean,
know.
that's kind of what I was hoping for. I thought that was part of why, it could have a little bit more of a floor built in. No, he hit the floor with 3.9 fantasy points and only
Yeah,
one target, no catches. That was
it was brutal.
brutality.
It was rough. So Gus Edwards, assuming he'll that ownership play for me, could get interesting though because they are big favorites. It isn't to say that the Colts have a terrible run defense or a defense or anything, but and then the Anthony Richardson side. I talked a lot about Zach Moss last week. That Deion Jackson was so bad that Moss likely ends up being the guy. He was not only the guy. I mean, this dude got every bit of work possible for the Indianapolis Colts. Just a less appealing matchup here. Big dogs. That was Houston. He played 98% of snaps, though, which is really amazing. No other running back played a snap. So the only time he wasn't out there was when they went empty backfield on one play. I think Zach Moss at this point would probably be a relatively easy stay away for me if he's
interesting.
Yeah, I don't love Zach Moss in this spot, depending on ownership plays a role, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
What's he at? 10%?
Yeah, I'm in love with him this week.
Really?
Yeah. I think he's a phenomenal play, and it's all dependent on what happens with
I liked
Anthony
him a
Richardson.
lot more last week than this week.
Yeah, so obviously the matchup was much better going up against Houston. Anybody facing Houston is going to be able to get theirs offensively in any capacity. You saw Gardner Minshew go out and carve them up. 19 for 23 with a tutty. Like, he was fantastic in relief duty there. I think if Anthony Richardson's out, this is going to be very easy for me to see Zach Moss continuing to get this kind of a role. I maybe not 98% of snaps, but for sure a lion's share of them. And I can't like Raheem Mostert at 6K playing 70-80% of snaps and not like Zach Moss playing 90-95% of the snaps at 5,500 against Baltimore. If you have Gardner Minshew out there too, it takes away the legs of an Anthony Richardson. Like, you want to get a ground game going, there's going to be no quarterback design runs. There's going to be nothing there. And even if there is, if you have Anthony Richardson out there coming off of a concussion protocol, a lot of issues there, like, maybe you just bell cow it even further here with Zach Moss, give him 20 touches. That is not outside of the realm of possibilities. So as you said, ownership plays a role, no doubt about it. We'll see what else shows up here as we go into the week. We could get some really cheap wide receivers from the Miami side. That's an appealing thing to try to take shots on in tournaments, but feel like Zach Moss is at least a known quantity. And while he's maybe not hashtag good, he's hashtag getting all of the work, saw 4 targets, 4 catches as well. That's something that can't be understated with Gardner Minshew back there as well. They're going to be dump offs available.
Look, I think that's perfectly reasonable as well. Just the volume alone. I'd pay attention to this offensive line. You had no practice from Quentin Nelson or starting center Ryan Kelly. That would suck if either of them don't play. But I think it's a double-edged sword with Richardson. On one hand, we've seen mobile quarterbacks just open up massive running lanes for running backs. If Minshew struggles, then there might not be a ton there for Zach Moss. But on a volume perspective, yeah, if he's going to get all of the work, if he's going to be out there on every play, then I do get it at that price point. I don't love the matchup. I think even with some injuries, this is still a good Baltimore defense. But for the passing game, is this a wait and see approach for the Colts for you right now, whether or not Richardson's in or out?
Yes and no. I feel like there's going to be more passing volume available with Gardner Minshew back there to a certain extent. I mean, we saw 37 against Jacksonville. They were playing in come from behind mode. You would expect come from behind mode here too. The Colts, they know that Anthony Richardson's some type of a project where pocket passing, that's going to be something that has to continue to develop for him because he has all the physical tools to be an elite quarterback. There's no question there. Nobody's ever going to question that with Anthony Richardson. But yeah, it feels like 5,100 for Gardner Minshew. I could easily talk myself into some Pittman-Granson combinations and try to make those doubles work. I don't think I'm going to be wanting to double Anthony Richardson. $6,700 for his salary there going along with Pittman feels like the easy go-to type of build for me there. Baltimore, you have a number of run back options. Probably not going to be Gus Bus for me. Looking at Zay Flowers, 5,400, coming off a 50% target share in week 1. Didn't exactly surprise us that went drastically down as you got Mark Andrews back into the mix, 4 receptions there on 5 targets. Mark Andrews back into that mix, being a guy at 6K that can win you the tight end position. And I think he's probably my favorite play from the entire game, period, because we're seeing a lot of people get comfortable punting tight end. I've been talking about it all season. That's kind of been the play. And then Travis Kelce, he's going to be on this main slate here as well. I'm very curious to see where Travis Kelce at 7,200 lands, because there's a lot of places where Andrews is higher projected in terms of ownership and almost fantasy score than that of Travis Kelce based on what we saw his first game. So I think the Baltimore side has some intriguing pieces, but to answer your question, Gardner Minshew, a wait and see approach, I think it's probably going to be doubles for me if I do stack him up, and Anthony Richardson, pretty clear cut for me to be singles.
Talk about Buffalo and Washington.
Yeah,
I think Washington can hang. They're 6.5 point dogs. You look at week 1 against Arizona, they looked a whole lot better in week 2. Buffalo people, I think, overreacted immensely to that first game against the Jets. Josh Allen has struggled against this Jets defense 3 straight times he's faced them now, dating back to the start of last season, a divisional foe. Crazy atmosphere there in that Rodgers debut. I mean, look, he made some mistakes, but that's not shocking to me in that game. Then they come out and they shit on the Raiders, as they should have. But I think this was a good Washington team, and I think this Washington team can also get pressure and make it a competitive game. Chase Young came back and looked really good. I think a lot of people were wondering what we were going to see out of him, and he looked excellent.
They didn't pick up his 4th-year option too, right?
Is that right?
I'm pretty positive they didn't. And I was watching that game thinking, oh shit, he looks really, really good. He'd look great in purple.
Yeah. Yeah. You could use it. No, he looked really good though. And I think this is still, you know what it is with Washington? I think they're not one of the best teams in the league. They're far from one of the worst teams in the league. They're just a well-built team in the trenches. And they come off to me as the type of team that if Sam Howell is serviceable, that's just going to be competitive every week, whether they're winning or losing, right? They just feel like they're going to be competitive every week because they don't have massive holes, glaring weaknesses like that Giants offensive line or other teams that had some positive expectations. With that in mind, though, I think the Allen stack, comparing this with some of these other very high-priced quarterbacks, and you have a bunch of them. Cousins, I'll throw into the mix, 6,900, but just in a high total game. Mahomes, Tua, Lamar, all of these guys, Justin Herbert against Minnesota. You get the feeling that Josh Allen here is going to be one that kind of gets left for dead at his price point, along with some of these pass catchers.
Agreed. He's going to be a quarterback that I have a lot of interest in based on what we're looking at for current ownership. We haven't even gotten to the Minnesota Chargers game yet. That is going to be chalk beyond chalk beyond chalk. That's going to be one that we probably spend the most amount of time on, simply because of what I believe those defenses are, which is dog shit. Absolute dog shit. I think Washington has a great defense. I would call their defensive line the strength of this football team. Maybe, 2 wide receivers that are absolutely fantastic in Dotson and McLaurin as well, that can elevate most quarterbacks. But Young and the other Montez Sweat, you've got Allen Payne in the middle. They are really, really set up nicely on the defensive side of the ball. Them versus the offensive line of the Buffalo Bills is going to be the matchup for me in this game. I think if they get protection for Allen, he could come in under the radar and be a piece that everybody looks back at and says, yeah, of course he was going to smash. They wanted to show it out. 8,100. He's 2.4% owned. He's $200 less than Mahomes and pulling 1/6 of the ownership. A guy who has some of those mobile wheels. Yeah, that's pretty intriguing. I think what's tough with, and I'm curious to get your viewpoint on this one. Who do you prefer at the tight end position with Buffalo? Because we're starting to see it be very fruitful. Dawson Knox got dinged up, but I think he should be good to go, assuming it's both him and Kincaid out there. Do you have a preference at 3,200, 3,400? Because I feel like they're the easy doubles with him in this spot.
Agreed. It makes it easy. Plus, it's like a tight end position that unless you're going Kelce or Andrews, Hawkinson, I guess, this week too. First week that we've had all 3 of them on the slate is usually ugly down there. If Dawson Knox doesn't play, then, Kincaid's going to be super popular. And, it almost makes you wonder if that puts him in in more fade territory than it would otherwise, because they do have a ton of weapons on that. What happens if Knox is out? You know that Kincaid gets steamed to the sun.
Yes.
Would you be
And
on board? Would you be on board with that massive ownership?
he's basically a wide receiver out there.
Yeah,
He's
I'd
not
be
doing any
fine with it.
blocking.
I'd like it more than a Luke Musgrave or, so.
I suppose, but
Or an Adam
Jordan Love's
Trout.
looked good, and I'm not okay with it. There's been some outliers to what he's been able to put up in the first couple of weeks, but yeah, Musgrave if you get Watson back here eventually one day, but Dalton Kincaid, he's basically playing wide receiver role, 10 targets now through 2 games. 13.7% target share isn't anything crazy, but yeah, if you get Knox out, that would be interesting. I think that's where Knox kind of ends up being the guy you slept on, mainly because he's had 9 targets himself, but he always ends up lower owned than Kincaid because we all think of Kincaid primarily as a pass catcher. Despite only 8.5% target share, has had that red zone look and the touchdown that came with it. I don't know. It feels like I would want to probably get to Knox ownership dependent, if you will, but Kincaid feels like the easy stack up. And yeah, as you said, he's going to get absolutely steamed in the event that you don't have Knox on the field.
Yeah, he is. But a situation to monitor here, no question. On the Washington side, you know, this Buffalo team from a run defense perspective, we saw they sealed everything up against the Raiders, only allowed 55 rushing yards. They were also all out to a big early lead. They won by 28 points. So, whatever. But coughed up some really big runs against the Jets, 172 rushing yards allowed. I think they're somewhere in the middle of that, probably somewhere in the middle of the road. Brian Robinson has essentially become the guy in Washington now. 19 and 18 carries, 2 and 3 targets through his first 2 games. Do you have any interest in him and the rest of this Washington Commanders offense this week?
Yeah, I had a ton of Brian Robinson on that. Well, it was such a weird slate because Kyron Williams had tons of. Field actually was there on the afternoon slate, but Brian Robinson, I talked about it on, I believe it was a DraftKings Rainmakers video I did where I said, go out and get Brian Robinson against Denver because you had the fumble in week 1 for Antonio Gibson, and I feel like nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about the fumble. I glanced over it a little bit on that Thursday, but really reiterated on Sunday that I thought that there was a potential Brian Robinson had to go out and be the absolute dude in that spot. 18 carries, getting volume in the receiving game. And Antonio Gibson, if he's not going to be on the field in third down situations, he doesn't have nearly as much utility as Brian Robinson does. So I'm unfortunately more on the Gibson side for best ball purposes. I think I might have made some mistakes there. Mistakes were made, but I rectified that a little bit in week 2. And I think here against Buffalo, this is a team that 19th so far in terms of rushing yardage allowed, 113.5 through 2 games here for Buffalo. That's not nothing. I think Brian Robinson is definitely somebody that could get unleashed again here at 5,800. Now, does Gibson another week in here in come from behind mode, which they haven't necessarily had to be in? Does that end up being something where Gibson's on the field a little bit more? I don't know. But I definitely know I preferred Brian Robinson by a landslide in this spot.
So do I, without question. I don't really love the pass catching options here. Yeah, if you're stacking this game, you at least have some Dotson, McLaurin, those type of guys. We'll see if Logan Thomas ends up being active or not. He's dealing with a concussion. That's their, starting tight end here that oftentimes gets some opportunities in the passing game. But McLaurin and Dotson are really cheap. So I don't hate that just as low owned plays. You have to think the pass catchers for this team are going to be super low owned, but that would really be the only reason I'd get to anybody in the passing game from Washington this week.
Yeah, it's you're not really getting any yak out of Jahan Dotson here either. 1.2 yak per reception. That's really, really low. So he's basically getting targeted on the sidelines, not a whole lot after the catch. So what's that upside really look like? I think Terry McLaurin, 5,600, he would be the one piece that I would want to get to in terms of run backs. I do like Sam Howell a little bit more than I think you do, based on what we've seen in the preseason, based on what we've seen now in that week 2 on the road in Denver. 2-0 Washington team. If they can keep it humming offensively and keep providing stuff on the ground here with Brian Robinson, he's still going to be the priority. But Sam Howell can get some stuff done with his legs too. I think he's a candidate more for singles for me. I don't think I want to be doubling him up with McLaurin, Dotson, tight end. If you end up having a situation where Logan Thomas continues to not practice, maybe we end up talking about Jonathan Bates come Sunday. That's just a gross spot. But yeah, John Bates, 3 catches, 5 targets their last time out. He could end up being another one of those tight ends on the opposite side of this game that gets steamed up on Sunday.
Do you want to stack Houston and Jacksonville?
Sure do.
44-point total. CJ Stroud, hey, look, guy's lost a fumble in each of his last 2 games, hasn't thrown any picks, though. From a passing perspective, dude's putting up some numbers. I mean, you want to talk about buoying guys like Robert Woods, who was dead last year in Tennessee as their de facto number 1. Nico Collins looks great. My boy Tank Dell coming in hot in week 2. Dude,
how did he become your boy?
I've been talking about Tank Dell forever, man. I have 30% Tank Dell in best ball.
Oh, fuck.
On Sunday's show, I said I think Tank Dell was the guy for Houston. So that's how he became my boy.
Well, Nico Collins is the only guy that I really ended up playing on the Houston side with.
Well, he was great too.
He was fantastic, but I wish I had some Tank Dell in my life. I think
Tank Dell is actually good though, man. I'm telling you, he's not bad at all.
You had some other cheapies that ended up going off. The Craig Reynolds thing ended up steamed up a little bit on Sunday, and of course he just smashes. But Tank Dell, 10 targets right from the get-go. You can't understate when a quarterback, like your franchise quarterback, CJ Stroud comes in, he asked for Tank Dell in the draft, like specifically by name, said I would like Tank Dell on my team. They went out and got him in, I think, the 3rd round it was. He kind of impressed me on Sunday. He looked really, really good. And I know that he got steamed up after the really good preseason debut that he had and had some type of rapport there with Stroud. But I thought when you got Collins and Woods on the field that would get diluted. Obviously, after week 1, they said, no. John Mechie isn't it. Tank Dell played a ton, and he looked awesome.
He did. I was telling Neil yesterday, I got very fortunate. All of my Tank Dell exposure in best ball is 20th round last pick on DraftKings before the preseason. After the preseason game, I just kind of stopped drafting him because you saw how that went.
Oh yeah. He started getting like 15th, 16th. And I was like, I can't do this with a Houston wide receiver. I took Mechie in the 20th a lot and ended up taking, that was pretty much the only guy, him and Robert Woods I played. I have almost no Nico Collins in best ball, which sucks.
I don't have much. I have a ton of Tank Dell. I wish I had more Nico Collins. Tank Dell, 45 routes run though last game, 48 for Woods, 40 for Collins. So Tank Dell, now that Noah Brown is on the IR, he's clearly, very clearly up there in the pecking order. He's the number 3. Maybe as Mechie gets worked back in, he'll get a little bit more. But my assumption remains exactly the same as it was on Sunday. Until further notice, I think Tank Dell is a firm player in this offense and an every down player. So ultimately, the reason I asked you about this stack was not because either of us have a huge amount of faith in Houston offense by any stretch. Understandable. The difference, though, is that all of these guys are cheap. From Dell at 3,600, he's got a Q tag, so pay attention. I think he'll be fine. He was limited in practice. Woods is very cheap. Collins is 53. And they've been throwing the ball an insane amount. CJ Stroud, 47 attempts last game, 44 attempts in game 1. If they're going to keep throwing that much, then I don't mind having some pieces of a cheap pass catching offense.
100% agree. And I think coming into it's Thursday right now. Right now, if the slate started today, based on our ownership, based on what is coming out for me, doing some early look stuff with the Sims, Trevor Lawrence would be my highest owned quarterback. And I love the run back options. I love Nico Collins. I love Tank Dell. I love Robert Woods at 4,400, going to be somebody who gets a little bit underlooked. He's had 19 targets through 2 games. There's so much passing volume coming from CJ Stroud. I think I got to be playing a little bit of him here too, but 91 pass attempts, as much as maybe I don't love his outlook for this team long-term, just from winning a games perspective, there's no doubt that CJ Stroud is going to add some fantasy goodness, not just to himself, but to these receivers. They are out there just chucking. Dameon Pierce now too, all of 26 touches now through the 2 games, and pretty much nobody else getting any type of crazy work. 11 carries for Devin Singletary. They are out there running a lot of plays, and they are out there airing it out. So I'm a big fan of these wide receivers. Dalton Schultz also has just gotten a little bit underlooked here, coming off of 7 targets. Hasn't really had a huge ADOT, nothing to really go for it, but there's no doubt that a veteran tight end like that could go a little bit underlooked here too. I love a lot about this football game, and most of it is just because of how easy it is to stack up Jacksonville with those main pieces, and you know what you're kind of getting. Christian Kirk having a pulse again after week 1, people overreacting a little bit. Love the Jacksonville side, but I love these run backs from Houston.
Yeah. They were of the top 15 target getters in week 2, 3 of them were Houston Texans.
Holy shit. I didn't know that.
Crazy. I just looked it up right now. I'm fading the backfield. This is exactly the same sentiment that I had last week. I will take into this week. There's not really any, there's too much uncertainty here. With Dameon Pierce is not your bell cow back right now. He's played 45% of snaps in both games. Devin Singletary saw his snap count rise last game. And then Mike Boone was your pass catching back in week 1. And then he was a healthy and active, a healthy scratch in week 2. But Dario Gumbawale ended up coming in, and he didn't go overlooked. Look, he didn't do much. He only had two attempts, but they still used 3 backs is my point. They didn't make Boone inactive and only used 2 backs. Pierce did have 15 looks or 18 looks, 15 carries and 3 targets. And he is inexpensive, but there's a lot of inexpensive running backs this week again. And I don't know how I prioritize that. Yeah.
5,200 for him here. It feels like if you're not getting him in the box, he's yet to score. So we haven't seen any kind of a ceiling, but 6.7, 5.5 fantasy points here. It would be very shocking to me that he was on the field for 65, 70% of snaps or something. I think that would just be a little bit surprising for me. He's 5,200, and this is, again, a team that it just seems going to be airing it out. They're going to be behind in a lot of football games because of this defense. And so that just provides ceiling exclusively to the wide receivers and tight end position here from Houston. And I feel like you're forcing in a very, very contrarian game script by trying to force in anything that has to do with this running game. Could Singletary take a pass catch to the house? Sure. Could you have Dameon Pierce bust off a 60-yarder, some kind of fluky deal? Sure. But in terms of volume, in terms of what we can actually project, I don't find anybody from Houston's running game any way, shape, or form enticing.
We had a comment in chat that said that Stroud has a Q tag. Yeah, he's going to play. He had the same Q tag for the same shoulder in week 2.
And he said yesterday he was feeling better.
Yeah. Limited on 100%. Wednesday. He's gonna he'll play unless there's something else that happens throughout the week. He's gonna play.
Well, last week too, he had a late downgrade. It was Wednesday, Thursday he practiced, and Friday he just sat out. And I think it was probably rest purposes for the shoulder. And then
it's a shoulder, but it doesn't seem bad. Plus, he chucked the ball 47 times, and honestly, I think there's a possibility that CJ Stroud ends up being good.
Okay, that's too far. I can't have that.
Why?
Because I've already attached myself to the CJ Stroud isn't good, but will put up fantasy points narrative. And I don't want to, I'm not willing to change that opinion yet because he's still pretty locked in on first reads. He's still kind of doing things that he's a rookie quarterback. You know what I mean? We don't know. The ceiling could be there, but Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Chris Olave, everybody out of Ohio State recently makes every quarterback look really enticing coming out of there.
Look, I get what you're saying, and here's what I'm saying. It's only 2 games. I'm not just taking away from that. But the fact that he's thrown 91 attempts without an interception guys, if you want to pretend that, hey, Robert Woods and Nico Collins and Tank Dell are the, second coming of Jerry Rice, fine. But, we all know they're not. I love Tank Dell, but come on. And Nico Collins, sure. 3rd or 4th round draft pick. He's probably pretty decent. Robert Woods had Tannehill throwing in the ball last year, and there was nobody else on the field, and he was awful. Stroud's at least making these guys viable. They've lost both of these games, and they haven't looked great, but it's not like he has any help whatsoever on defense. All I'm saying is to limit those type of turnovers in the passing game through your first 2 weeks, I think if you're a Houston fan, you're at least encouraged by that, because how many rookie quarterbacks throwing to those guys playing from behind end up getting picked off 3 times a game in those same spots?
That's a good point. Again, for me, it has to do with me being a person who wants to be right about this. I guess for everything we've seen, it falls into the camp that he is a lot better than what many expected him to be, myself included. And, he doesn't have exactly through 2 games have incredible PFF grades by any means. 60.7, sitting near the bottom in terms of QBs in the league, 25th amongst 32 qualifiers. So not exactly ideal. They're seeing a lot of the same things, but yeah, not having a turnover yet, tons of volume. From a fantasy perspective, which is what we're worried about, there's still some really good stuff going on with Texans here in this spot.
You know what really stood out to me last week on the Jacksonville side, and we had discussed this going into week 2 as well. Tank Bigsby getting the goal line work in that week 1 game.
Mm-hmm.
Not the case this week. So, Doug Peterson's a weirdo when it comes to that stuff, and he could decide to change things on the, right. Seriously, the blink of an eye. But Tank Bigsby not only did not record a touch, but he didn't record a target or anything. Travis Etienne in that game, they played terribly, but while his volume was limited, he was clearly the guy. I like him a lot this week against Houston. Jacksonville just looks good in general.
Yeah, Travis Etienne, I am going to be in on that. We saw Bigsby, we saw Dearness Johnson not really play. All of 6 snaps for Dearness Johnson there in that game, and then Bigsby, no touches, no targets, nothing, just 12 offensive snaps. So it's going to be pretty simple for us to look at Travis Etienne as one of the guys at 6,900 that you can actually click on reliably. Did not feel that way in week 1. Somehow ended up right about that. And then, as you said, Doug Peterson, he's going to change things. Teams are going to change things based on matchup, based on a lot of things. And people get so locked into 2 weeks of football. But I do think Travis Etienne is still the guy that they want out on the field the most. It is a game environment I absolutely want to have some exposure to. He's 118 yards per game through 2 games. The Houston Texans defense are giving up on the ground. We know what he can do in the passing game as well. Kind of an easy guy that I can play individually or stack up with Lawrence. No problem with either.
Okay. Let's talk about prize picks before we move on. I know we always do sportsbook reads. Maybe that's me just being selfish on this show and trying to, share the wealth with everyone with these sign-up bonuses because they've been so damn good to start the football season. But a lot of you guys aren't in legal betting states, right? Many of you aren't in legal betting states. You might reside in the once great state of California. You might be in a bunch of other states that don't allow it. What's that, Jordan?
The once great state. What are you implying? That it's not great anymore?
That's what once great means.
I don't know. $6.49 for a tank of gas is just up my alley.
That's not what it is right now, is it?
$6.49.
Jesus, dude.
Like, fuck me, right?
Great weather, though.
Oh, beautiful weather.
Although the funny thing is, I'm in the Northeast. I'm in the outside of Philadelphia, like 40 minutes outside of Philly. The weather, I swear, has been better here over the last year than it has been for like Southern Californians. Because you guys got hit with those wicked, like those rains were insane for a while, right? Like monsoon type rains at one point, and they still don't know how to harness rainwater so they just send 90% of it back out to the ocean and treat it as, waste, which is great. But
this is the greatest prize picks read of all time.
But by the way, 90% of what I do here is talk out of my ass. But no, you remember, didn't you guys even get snow at one point? Like, didn't it get really cold in the winter?
Yeah. So I'm going up to snow this weekend.
Here.
Yeah. I was going to say.
It was 70 degrees here. I was talking to Jordan Frank about it when it was snowing by you. Crazy. You guys obviously have the best climate. There's no doubt about it.
Well, thank you.
It's awesome.
There's that.
Yeah, but
between that and then going back and forth to Scottsdale, it is not a tough life out here. In the Southwest.
Not at all. The older I get though, man, I've loved having 4 seasons. The older I've gotten, I've started to really embrace that. I used to hate it, but like when it got freezing cold, I like it now. But it's to each his own. My point is, there's a lot of you who are in states that don't have legal sports betting. And Prize Picks has the $100 first match. Prize Picks is blowing up, man, blowing up. I know you play cards on Prize Picks basically every single day, whether it's, and the cool thing too, they have an assortment of props that are unlike anything else. They have a lot that actual sports books don't have. You see it all of the time. which I think there's probably a way to get an edge there, significant edge with some of those as well, because there's no one that's projecting for that stuff. So you have strong leans and strong reads on some of that. All you're doing is building out lineups with player props, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 5. You hit 5, you 10x. But the better thing is, unlike a traditional parlay, if you only hit 4, you still 2x. You make money back on 3. Same thing, 25x if you do a 6-player card. You still make money back. Double up your money on 5. Make money back if you hit 4 of 6. Those are great little wrinkles in there for sure. And you can mix as many sports as you want. It is the itch being scratched for non-legal betting states without question. And also, they have the touchdown props. I sometimes love to try and look at some of these touchdown props, Eric, to see if we can find some good stuff, because there's no juice on either side. It's just over or under half a touchdown.
So my big card that I had last week had, I know Saquon Barkley plus 100. Technically, you should be looking and cross-referencing over at books and finding yourself the ones that are juiced more heavily, because then you're using a market-based approach. We have the tools at OddsShopper that can help you do that. But my card last week had tackles and assists from a specific player. We had the Travis Kelce touchdown minus 140, where it was at books. That was a straight up prop along with Saquon Barkley touchdown. There are so many great props where if you're using our projections at Stochastic, or if you're using the market-based approach over at OddsShopper, you have a significant edge on the field, because you're going to get stats and things that aren't necessarily things that, even PrizePicks is adjusting for. They're offering up so many different elements, whether it's receiving yard in your first 2 receptions, rush yards in first 5 attempts. These are things that might not seem like, oh my God, I don't know if I can deal with that. But there are phenomenal ways at being able to go back and looking at first game scripts, second scripts of plays from specific teams. You can find drastic edges in some of these. So it's really fun to research, as at the same time that it's really fun to put some of these cards together. Always try to build out 5 or 6 player cards as well, because your EV goes up drastically rather than just playing 2 or 3. But if you're looking for a play for tonight, I'm in love with Elijah Mitchell over 28.5 rushing yards.
It's already in my video up on OddsShopper.
Oh, is it? Oh, nearly 100% of snaps for Christian McCaffrey on Sunday. They are 10.5 point favorites here today in this spot. And Elijah Mitchell has not been worked out. He is fresh coming into this spot. And there are multiple times when you go back through Shanahan's, the way he handles running backs on short days like this, Elijah Mitchell, I see playing more than 25-30% of the snaps here. You could get a game script that gets out of hand against the Giants with no Saquon. 28.5 rushing yards. It's minus 115, minus 125 at pretty much every book. Phenomenal play to build your cards with.
Yep. BetMGM has minus 115. It's your best, discounted juice. You see, Kyle Shanahan also said that he has to fix the fact that Elijah Mitchell did not get any work. I'll take it a step further. Not just did McCaffrey get 100% of snaps and they need to get Mitchell the ball, they're on super short rest. They're playing, they're 10.5 point favorites playing 4 days later. Also on BetMGM, I bet Elijah Mitchell anytime touchdown score at plus 260.
I love it. I legitimately love that play.
Yeah, why not, right? It's funny, you and I did not talk about this game. We seem to be on the same page. Plus 200 on DraftKings, plus 165 on Bet365, and plus 260 over. And by the way, OddsShopper, if you sign up at PrizePicks with the link in the description of chat, you're getting a free month of OddsShopper Premium. It's $100 value. Free month of OddsShopper Premium, everything. And you might be like, yeah, but what about the fact that I'm not in a legal betting state? Doesn't matter. We have the PrizePicks Optimizer, which builds out the best plus EV lineups for you. Underdog, Jock Market, Sleeper, all of those. Everything for Pick'em we have an OddsShopper free for the entirety of the month. And you're getting a first match deposit bonus up to $100. The tools are awesome. Might I add too, guys, using this just to shop odds for PrizePicks, because we have the PrizePicks tool. It gives you all of the plus EV plays, even if you're not using the optimizer. It's huge. It's huge for something like that. And you're getting it free. Plus, it's a great place to play. $100 first match deposit bonus. I will give you the best PrizePicks touchdown, anytime touchdown prop without question. It is Tony Pollard over a half a touchdown. He is minus 165 to minus 190 across books right now. And you're getting it with no juice attached on PrizePicks.
Slam dunk.
Yeah. Like maybe he doesn't score, but he leads the league in red zone attempts and he leads the league in goal line carries. Crazy. Crazy. Anyway, let's talk about this next one up. What do you got on Atlanta and Detroit? I'm on Russ St. Brown, might not play with turf toe. And even if he does, that worries me a little bit. David Montgomery's not going to play. I know they won't rule him out yet, but I don't think he's going to play. And Atlanta's pretty healthy. Bijan Robinson's a monster.
It's a monster. He's incredible. I'm very, very excited to just watch his progression.
They still should have drafted Jalen Carter, but he's very good.
Should have drafted Jalen Carter. That's correct. Running backs matter until they get hurt, like Saquon Barkley. Carter is just going to steamroll human beings for the rest of eternity. And the league is in a lot of trouble because, of course, he landed on the Eagles. But that's beside the point. In this spot, this is all about injuries for me. Detroit is really thin. Not only Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you have Josh Reynolds, who's been limited here. If you don't have Reynolds out on the field, because he's been awesome, has been the number 2 wide receiver there, getting really valuable targets, averaging over 15 yards per catch this season, just incredible stuff. Had the 2 tutties to go with 6 targets for 5 catches last week. You have Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones, Antoine Green. It is disturbing. You're going to be seeing Sam Laporta be a guy that is projected for double-digit fantasy points and being somebody who gets steamed up come Sunday. It's a great Atlanta spot here. Again, they both play in domes, so you're always running into a dome spot here. They've been giving up a lot more on the ground, Atlanta has, than through the air, but they've also played some really defunct passing games, so I'm not going to read into that all that much, especially with Detroit out there. But Jared Goff at home has been absolutely incredible. You would like to see Amon-Ra out there just for what that upside can be. You definitely want to see Josh Reynolds out there at 4,200, who could end up being massive chalk, even with St. Brown in, if we hear anything is wrong with that foot. And then Jahmyr Gibbs. This is like, what do you do with Jahmyr Gibbs? Because I have no idea how I want to handle this spot yet, because I can't imagine they just unleash him here. But if they do, 6,600 is such a discount.
I'd be, if assuming Montgomery's out, I think I'll be all in on Gibbs.
Okay. I that's where I think I would be leaning, but when you start seeing 25-30% ownership in a spot like this, and Atlanta is it's going to get freaky. It's going to get really, really weird, but there is no doubt. I mean, he broke 4 tackles, playing only 27% of the snaps in week 1. His elusiveness, I don't know what his rating is on Madden, but he is absolutely slippery. He is so damn good.
Broke 6 tackles, led the league, and had 7 touches on the ground or something.
Stupid.
Yeah, it's dumb. 21 routes run last game. Also, if St. Brown doesn't play, how do you not feature Gibbs heavily in the passing game?
You just do.
Yeah. I like Laporta too. You guys know I will go right back to Sam Laporta. I think he's going to continue to build a rapport with Jared Goff. He has not dropped a single one of his targets. Those type of things. I think when you're talking about rookie tight ends, I think they go a lot further than it might suggest in the box score, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he's caught a 10 of 11 targets. Also, 12.5 yards per reception last game was very encouraging after week 1 against Kansas City. He's $4,000. I think Laporta against Atlanta, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown is out, that changes everything. Like, this offense probably doesn't function the same, and they won't be as good because he's so reliable. But I would be looking towards a lot of these discounted guys. I think Gibbs stands out. Laporta would stand out. Reynolds would stand out. Raymond would be viable. Yeah, I would definitely. I already have interest in Detroit, specifically Gibbs without Montgomery, and I don't mind Laporta at all either. But if St. Brown sits, my God, that makes things really interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be insane. You're going to see a lot of ownership. Again, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, without David Montgomery out there, he would be clear-cut my favorite play from this entire football game. Amon-Ra St. Brown sits, then I'm definitely going to be playing a lot of Josh Reynolds at 4,200, who's kind of been the go-to guy in a lot of progressions, even with Amon-Ra St. Brown on the field here. Sam Laporta, 4K, really intriguing. This could come in a little bit under-owned relative to what we think outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, who I do expect to get steamed to the moon with no David Montgomery there on Sunday. Yeah.
Any thoughts on this Atlanta team? I can tell you, I'll say quickly on my side. I think Bijan Robinson's always going to be in play, even though Algier's getting a lot of work. Robinson's just fantastic. Amazing that his longest run was 19 yards last game, but he averaged 6.5 yards per attempt. That's pretty amazing, right? When you consider it. He also had a long reception of 29 yards. He's sick, man. But I still have a tough time trusting Arthur Smith and his his play calling, especially if they were to fall behind. I don't know if I don't think. I mean, Ritter had a decent game, but I think Kenyon or Drake London probably had a ceiling game last time out. Neil said he would go back to some Kyle Pitts, and I actually kind of agree with him on that. Pitts is interesting to me. CJ Gardner-Johnson is out as well, so that could open up some things in the middle of the field if you're looking deep to somebody like Pitts. But yeah, interesting spot for the Falcons. Sketchy as well, though.
Yeah, extremely sketchy. Nice to see Drake London at least be in the vicinity of targetable. Kyle Pitts, the thing that jumps out to me for him is he's at least getting targets down the field, 13.9 ADOT. That's up there for a tight end, generally somebody that you wouldn't think of. He's being utilized as a wide receiver in a lot of these sets. And he's not a tight end, so it makes sense that you're seeing such a high ADOT for him in that spot, but it's still not something that I feel comfortable about, but I just thought I'd at least throw out there Kyle Pitts amongst all tight ends, 7th in the NFL in terms of ADOT at the tight end position. And then amongst qualifiers, people who've seen more than 2 targets, he is 4th. So I still feel like there's an upside for that home run play for those kind of opportunities. It's 3,900, so at least now you're getting the price that's reflective of what he's being, and that's just a under-targeted wide receiver in this offense. Arthur Smith, don't trust him in any way, shape, or form. Feels like Bijan Robinson's the easy, clear-cut guy that you could be playing. Mac Hollins, 3,500, maybe as an extremely contrarian piece coming off of 10 targets in 2 games, but we definitely expect them, even in some of these game scripts where they're playing from behind, to just feature the running game and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. And that makes it very difficult for me to want to do anything like plant my flag and say, yes, I think this will happen. Could Drake London get another touchdown, decent a number of targets? Sure. But I don't feel good about him relative to a lot of wide receivers that are way cheaper than him.
Agreed. I do love that Robinson played 72% of snaps last game, though. That's
awesome.
That's the thing. Like Algier's getting work, but Robinson, 72% of snaps. You really could see this continue to climb. I think it's possible that you could see that.
I wanted to ask you about this because this is something from a game script perspective. Atlanta was way up on Carolina early, and it felt like they went to Algier that entire second half. Do you feel confident Bijan Robinson is like the go-to guy when they're playing in close football games? Because that's kind of the impression I got, is that they were coming from behind. They were going back and forth with Green Bay trying to catch up. And Bijan Robinson got the featured work there. I think we want to kind of be sensitive to that in our builds, where Bijan Robinson is a great run back option, I think, regardless of things. But like, I think he's an exponentially better option to go with any kind of like a single that you're looking at from the Detroit side, or just playing independent, because it's hard to imagine a scenario where Bijan Robinson isn't the go-to guy in competitive football games.
Totally agree. Totally. I also think Arthur Smith didn't even know through the first 2 weeks what the plan was there.
And then he's like, oh shit, he's really good.
Yeah, right. But what you're saying makes more than enough sense. Makes a ton of sense. Bijan Robinson ran 30 routes last week. 30 routes last week. In context, Pitts ran 35 and London ran 32. Bijan ran 30 routes last week. And so, yeah, I think this sets up nice for him. And I expect Detroit to be able to put some points up as well. This is by far the stiffest test that Atlanta has had, as far as an opposing offense is concerned. Let's talk about Tennessee.
Carolina and Green Bay. That's the last part, is that just kind of looking at who these oppositions have faced to really give you some context. Of course, they're going to look good at, giving up only 283 yards through the air. The Falcons are through the first 2 games. When you face Carolina and Green Bay, who, as good as Jordan Love's been, they've still had the kitty gloves based on the offensive scheme that they're running.
For sure. And I think Atlanta's made legitimate improvements. The Jesse Bates thing, as I've talked about a lot, is huge for that team. But still, they haven't really been tested yet. They will be this week. Tennessee, 3.5-point dogs. Man, I like Tennessee in this game from a betting perspective. I'll tell you why. And obviously, from week to week, there's so much parity in the NFL, but Deshaun Watson's looked really bad. This currently looking like one of the worst contracts ever in the NFL. I don't think anybody can argue that. I really don't. I mean,
it's weird because everybody's cheering for him. That was a joke.
Well, I'll tell you one person that's cheering for him. Gainesville Zone. You know who that is?
I don't know. Is he a lawyer?
No. Did you see the suspected Deshaun Watson burner account?
Oh no.
Oh, you
Man,
gotta look in.
I've missed a
That's
lot on Twitter. It was my birthday on Tuesday, and
that's a
I
fun
feel
one.
like this entire thing I've just haven't been paying attention to.
That's why I love doing my betting video every Wednesday, because I dive into every single team, and you find I never would have found that. Yeah, Gainesville Zone. Gainesville spelled wrong, by the way. It Nobody is backing Deshaun Watson like this Gainesville own on every comment was. And if that's the case, when there's burner accounts, I'll be honest, that the human side of me kind of feels bad for the guy. Like, for if that were me in that situation, I just wouldn't go on social media, because it's easier for me to just not look at that stuff. The Joe Rogan approach, right? Like, don't even read comments on YouTube, on Twitter, or anything. To me, it's easier to just pretend it's not there. Can't imagine just going through stuff and reading all these horrible things about you and then being like, you know what, I'm going to respond to this as someone else. Got some wild shit going on in your head. But
Yeah, every PR team should sit everybody down and do the Kevin Durant story. If you go through that, it's just like, all right, you're going to get found out eventually. Like, it's just impossible to be that high profile of an athlete and not have people care so much to not connect the dots. They're going to.
But how do they win this game if Watson doesn't play decent? Because this Tennessee team really can smother the run. And I know Jerome Ford looked good last game. This is also, they were missing key defensive contributors. The Steelers were. So I think this is one of those games where if Deshaun Watson isn't locked in, they could really struggle. And Tennessee on offense just needs to do enough. With that in mind, though, Ford's obviously the chalk here with Nick Chubb on the IR. They did bring in Kareem Hunt, so we can talk about that. Tennessee, though, I think it's viable if you wanted to get to some Derrick Henry, because I would expect him to be low owned. I don't want the passing game here this week. And then for Cleveland, yeah, you could say it's a pass funnel defense for Tennessee. But the truth is, how confident are you in Amari Cooper right now, and Elijah Moore, and David Njoku? How confident can you really be in how this offense is functioning right now?
I have like so little interest in this football game in general. DeAndre Hopkins, from the Titans, could he see 13 targets like he did week 1 in a dome? Sure, but Cleveland's defense, not exactly something that I want to go out of my way to go pick on still. And as you said, how do the Browns function without Deshaun Watson playing better? They don't. They have not been functioning in a lot of ways. The Cincinnati game was a product of their defense completely stifling Joe Burrow, and then Deshaun Watson just playing game manager to a certain extent. 29 passing attempts, adds a little bit of utility there on the ground as well with the 5 rushes, 45 yards and a touchdown in week 1. But you saw Pittsburgh, again, another pretty brutal spot for Deshaun Watson, under pressure, really getting nothing downfield, all of 235 yards passing there, even in a game script where they were going to need him to make something happen there in that fourth quarter. It's been brutal to watch. And now Amari Cooper, I mean, he's continuing to deal with this groin and whatever else is going on with him. He saw 10 targets, though. That was pretty unexpected for everybody there. He ended up looking a lot better than you, myself, anybody probably would have expected. But it's weird to say. I think David Njoku's my favorite play from the game, because he's at least 4,200, and he's been a tight end with that kind of upside before. Never really with Deshaun Watson towards the tail end of last season, but David Njoku is kind of that dude that can give you the differentiation at 4,200, where he's not one of the cheapies and he's not one of those expensive high upside guys, but he still carries, I think, a pretty high upside against a Tennessee team that is obviously going to sell out to sell the run. And then again, Jerome Ford's just going to be too popular for me, I think, this week. Probably going to have to be hitting eject against Tennessee.
Man, Deshaun Watson is 33rd or 32nd in adjusted completion percentage this year.
It's horrible.
There's one player worse than him, Jordan Love, so far.
That's what I'm getting at. It's so schematically dependent, like for Green Bay, what we've seen from them. I think Jordan Love's looked better than that would indicate, but there is no doubt he's had the kitty gloves on. He has definitely had the kitty gloves on.
Mm-hmm. I know there's people in chat saying that, where was it? Bill was saying Watson is bad, but the Titans are vulnerable in the air, so not a bad option this week. Look, I get it. I totally do. but the Titans have a good defensive line. They can get pressure. Watson's going to need to be sharp, or this is going to turn sideways real quick if they can't get anything going on the ground, because they could get things going on the ground last week. They did at many. Nick Chubb was steamrolling that Steelers team. And then Jerome Ford came out and played well too. And Watson still couldn't get anything significant going through the air. That's all I'm saying, right? Like, he needs to be better. If you wanted to take some shots on a Watson stack, I wouldn't blame you. 12-game slate. I'm just going to, waiting and seeing isn't always the best approach in DFS. Generally speaking, it isn't. I'll wait and see on Watson, because for what I've seen so far, he's just looked bad.
Yeah, Tennessee defense, 3K. You get to go up against what we've seen from Watson, and you get to go up against Jerome Ford ownership, because you're not going to be playing Jerome Ford in those Tennessee lineups. I think there's some leverage to be had there.
I like that for sure. New England and New York Jets. By the way, guys, hit that. Take a single second and atone for your sins here on the Strategy Show. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Show a little love. Let's get to 100. Let's see what we can do. I know this show doesn't have the biggest concurrent viewership because it's a long show and people listen throughout the week. Sometimes they take, they segment it out. But if you're here with us and you've yet to do so, tap that thumbs up. Appreciate it. New England and New York Jets. Good. A game we don't have to spend a lot of time on. Ramondre Stevenson. I was on with our boy Adam Kaufman on his, Boston-based sports betting show on Monday night. And he was talking about, should we be concerned about Zeke? Quite frankly, I think what you're going to see is the opposite direction. I think you're just going to see more and more Ramondre as this goes on and less Zeke. We saw it last week. Zeke wasn't targeted. He fit 5 carries to Stevenson's 15. I think the Patriots get a win and don't go to 0-3, but I'd be lying to you if I told you I was confident against this Jets defense. Like, the Jets got slaughtered in week 2, but that was also just an amazing defense for Dallas. Zach Wilson got picked 3 times. Patriots defense is no slouch either. They should have Jonathan Jones back, I would think, as well. So there's a lot of factors here. There's a lot of nuance, but this feels like a super 37-point total, only 2.5-point spread on both sides of this game. I wouldn't, if it turns out I have no exposure to anyone from this game, I wouldn't be crying about it.
Yeah, I think the running back position from both sides is probably where I'm looking at in this one. I know Kendrick Bourne's been targeted. Devontae Parker been limited. We're going to be paying attention to his news coming into Sunday, because he got targeted at a really high clip right out of the gate. 8 targets for him. Looked like going to be a primary dude there for Mac Jones, but the running back spot, Ramondre Stevenson, I think is pretty clear cut. But what do you think about the this is me thinking about it from a football perspective more than like the projections, because projections are going to hate Breece Hall. But Breece Hall is elusive as hell. They were always losing that Cowboys game. They were down early. They were down late. There was no point in having Breece Hall, who just got reconstructed with this knee and everything else in the, there was no point in them having Breece Hall out on the field in that spot. This is a far more winnable game here at home. Can kind of really utilize Breece Hall, I think, more going forward, because coming off of week 1, there was no doubt he was the best football player on the Jets side of the ball. 127 yards on the ground, big playability. Yeah, it was all bolstered by one really big carry, but that's the kind of thing that Breece Hall does. And that's the kind of thing that you're looking for in tournaments, is somebody who's sub 1%, sub 2%, that can maybe pop a play like that for you at low ownership. He's 5,600, price is down $300 from last week. I want to at least throw it out there that in large field GPPs, I think he's going to be a guy that I try to force in a little bit more than the field is here come Sunday.
Totally get and appreciate your thinking on this one. If I'm playing devil's advocate, here's what I would say. Because he's not going to be owned. He's going to have no ownership. No. Here's what I would say. People can shit talk Bill Belichick all they want about without Brady, he's nothing and this and that, right? They actually haven't played, for what it's worth. They have not played bad football through the first 2 weeks. They could have beaten the good Eagles team that just, coming off a Super Bowl loss. They could have beat the Eagles. You want to blame anything, blame the fact that they didn't go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, right? That they have nobody for Mac Jones, who I think is playing good football. And I think Bill O'Brien is hamstrung in what they can do with this team. I think they're playing well, but you can say whatever you want about Belichick. He knows he's pretty good at taking away what teams are best at. And we saw with Tyreek Hill, it just so happened that Raheem Mostert went off. There is no Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, or Tyreek Hill on the Jets. There's Garrett Wilson, who is so good, and I'm so sad for my best ball shares and just for him in general, because I was projecting a monster season from him. But outside of that, I mean, Zach Wilson outright stinks. He's objectively terrible. Do they just do everything they can to take the run game away and rely on some pretty good guys in the secondary to just force turnovers, get some pressure, and not let them run?
I think they absolutely do that. My argument is always based on the ownership for a guy like
and
Breece
he could
Hall.
spring one loose, as we've seen him do many times.
Exactly. I think that's kind of what it is. It's finding that one piece of differentiation in your Kansas City game stacks, and some of these other pieces that, you know, for me, Jacksonville is going to be a big part of my builds for Sunday based on where ownership's at right now too. Christian Gonzalez has been, I think, probably the best cornerback in the NFL already. Oregon rookie, sub 4.40. The guy is incredible. You know, obviously I married into a Duck family. We're going to be enjoying Saturday, that's for sure. But I can't tell you how good he was with the Ducks and how incredible that he's been with New England right from the get-go. Obviously, we saw him in the primetime spot and lived up to the billing there as a top 20 pick, which never happens for Bill Belichick, by the way. He never goes up and drafts corners. He always drafts them later. So I think that was kind of showing you how good he is. I think it's going to be him on Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson's not going to have a good time considering Zach Wilson's the one throwing in the football anyways. It's a really tough spot for me to get to anything else on the Jets side besides that one dart on Breece Hall being the guy, but totally get your point. I do assume Belichick tries to just try to sell out to stop the run, and if they do, they're probably going to have their way with them.
Let's talk about the Saints and the Packers. There's a lot of unknowns here, so check back later in the week. We have the show tomorrow. We have Saturday show, Sunday, 3.5 hour deeper dive live before lock, and a first look show. So I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this game as it stands currently. But Jamal Williams probably not going to play. Didn't practice yesterday. I'd be surprised if he played for sure. Kendrick Miller, though, was a full participant in practice, so it's probably him and Tony Jones and some Taysom Hill. That feels great. Although Green Bay's weakness is that run defense. And then Aaron Jones still not practicing. He probably doesn't play. We'll see. Christian Watson, limited practice. Maybe he'll make his season debut. There's just so many question marks. It's a low total game. New Orleans has a good defense. I mean, a good defense. Clearly, this by far the stiffest test that Jordan Love is going to face by far. Because he had the Bears and the Falcons in weeks 1 and 2. Tough matchup for him. AJ Dillon stinks. And then on the New Orleans side, they've got good pass catchers for sure. I love what I'm seeing from Michael Thomas. He finally looks healthy. I hope he stays healthy. They've got good guys. Chris Olave, all of these guys are good. But Rashid Shaheed is good. But I don't love this game right now.
I don't love it either. I don't have a lot from it outside of, a couple of shares of some tight ends that could show up. Musgrave, who you besmirched the good name of, but understandably so. I mean, it's going to be an interesting spot. Juwan Johnson as well, showing up in some of my preliminary builds, but doesn't seem like I'm getting to any Dillon. That was a big fade for me last week. Felt good about it. Nobody's going to play him this week, though, and maybe this is the spot where you take some shots on, if 1% him, 1% Breece Hall, guys of that nature. I prefer Breece Hall just because of what that upside could be. H.A. Dillon, it's so hard to imagine that they want to be just running him into the back of that line over and over again. 3.7 yards per carry last week was improvement off of the 1.5 we had in week 1 against Chicago, but nothing is all that exciting there on the Green Bay side of things. I don't even really find myself getting to a whole lot from the New Orleans side because I don't know if they're going to have to push it as much. I do think you're going to see the box score whores, Tony Jones Jr. It makes sense getting to 4,500 of him, but there's enough other pieces that are coming back now. Kendrick Miller should be active for this game, fully participated in practice on Wednesday. So I'm not completely in love with anything on that side of it. Olave Thomas, you can take shots on, but now you're seeing Olave at 7K. That's a little bit different for me. 6,500 he was on opening week against Tennessee. That made a lot of sense. Think he's pretty accurately priced now. And then Michael Thomas, we'll see if the ownership gets there coming off of a game where he got targeted at a pretty decent clip, 17 targets for him here. But overall, this game, I'm with you. It's disturbingly disgusting.
It's bad. Josh Gillum said, how is Green Bay bad versus the run, Laffy? Their D-line is solid. You tell me, brother. I mean, last year they allowed 5 yards per attempt, one of the worst in the league. They got smoked on the ground. And by the way, what I said was the weakness is I said the run game is weaker than their pass defense, which is objectively true. They allowed 211, and you can even talk about personnel moves as well, but they have to prove it. They allowed 211 rushing yards last week to the Falcons. Sure, Robinson's good, but they didn't slow him down. They allowed 6.5 yards per carry to him. They allowed 122 rushing yards in week 1. Once they show me that they can stop the run, I'll believe it, but they haven't. Yeah, 211 rushing yards last week, dude. You know, they got to prove it. That's all. And last year they stunk against the run. So we'll see. We'll see if they make improvements. But
yeah, we targeted them pretty much nonstop. Even guys like Kenny Clark there, 51.8 grade over at PFF for run defense grade. He's out there because he gets after the quarterback. That's what he does. 83.2 grade in that department, 10th amongst 114 defensive interior linemen. So like him, Gary on the Rashawn Gary now, he's a stud out of Michigan, has been decent at times, but again, run defense grade is non-existent for these guys. They are all noted for getting after the quarterback. It's a discernible difference between the two skill sets.
For sure. Yeah. Josh said Falcons do that to everybody, to be fair. Well, if you know that, then you shouldn't be allowing 200 plus rushing yards. There's a lot of teams out there that would clog that up and force Desmond Ridder to make horrible decisions. Keep running him into the line. Bijan's awesome, but you know what they're going to do, and they still did it. Anyway, Chargers and guys, Jordan can pull this up. Our NFL lineup generator with the red zone promo, really just use the link in the description or in chat. It is discounted for $9.99 for the first week. And boy, do you have a perfect time to use it, because we have Showdown lineup generator as well. So you're getting, there was ever a time where you're like, hey, I'd love to try these tools out, but I want to do it at the most opportune times possible. Well, given that we have main slate and Showdown, you've got the lineup generator for Thursday night tonight. You've got Sunday. You've got Sunday Showdown. You have Monday main slate and double showdowns on Monday. And then, assuming you do it today, you've got Thursday Showdown slate as well. It's an awesome tool. It's simulating these lineups thousands and thousands of times, throwing out the garbage and giving you the best plus EV lineups, where you can decide if you want to go contrarian type stacks, or maybe you're playing like a single entry. You want to go balance builds. You want to go chalky. You want to go cash lineups. You want to play DraftKings. You want to play on Showdown. Doesn't matter. All of that stuff is right there. And you're seeing the optimal, leave that on the screen, Jordan. You're seeing the optimal projection for everyone. You're seeing how chalky or contrarian each lineup is. Then you can save as many as you want or discard the ones you don't like. You can swap players in and out. Once you save the ones you like, upload those babies straight to CSV. It's optimized for mobile as well. And you can see your exposures to every player, to every team on all the lineups you saved, whether it's 3, 5, 10, 20, all of your lineups, all your exposures, all of that stuff. That's pretty cool, right? And it's a huge tool. We saw, Eric could attest to this. We saw so many big wins in the MLB season with that lineup generator. And it was guys playing like the mini max or the quarter or a $5 entry and hitting $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 with it. Guys playing, $10 a day. They're like, I've added this to the arsenal and I'm crushing with it. Well, NFL's even cooler because you've got the Showdown one where you can adjust whether you want, like, if you think the Giants are going to keep this close, you could go Giants up 6, Niners down 6. If you think it's just going to be a super low scoring game, adjust them both down. If you think the Niners just shit on them, adjust the Giants up or the Giants down and the Niners up, and then build your lineups that way. Or run it multiple ways. That's a great way to do it. If you're in like a 5-entry max, you could go and run one with like all these different scenarios in mind and get the best lineup for all of them. So really cool tool. Link in the description and in chat. It's less than $10, $9.99 for your first week. Check it out. And you're getting all of these slates to do so if you haven't yet. And if you ever have questions, hit me up on Twitter or the X at Laffy_D. Happy to help you out with those. All right. Talk to me about this Carolina or Chargers in Minnesota game. Here's what I'd like you to do. Instead of going on both sides, have it go on one and then having me ask you about the other one, let's approach this game from a no understanding of how chalky it's going to be. Let's approach it under the assumption that Eckler does not play, because I do not believe he does. And let's hit on it more from a stacking perspective, or just from a game theory standpoint, that's going to help people a lot more than just being like, oh, I like this guy and I like this guy.
54 total. I mean, it is a massive total. I said it from the get-go. The Minnesota defense is going to be a lot worse than people thought it was going to be. It might be even worse than I thought it was going to be at times. But now the Chargers are coming along for the party. There are decent enough pieces on both sides of the defensive ball. But as a whole, these offenses are geared to shoot out. And if you don't have Eckler in there, I think this is the much better bounce back spot here for Joshua Kelly. His price goes up $400, but you saw the majority of the work, and that's what matters. You saw pretty clear cut that the Chargers are going to rely on him, that Spiller, Dotson, whomever else, they're not even going to get mixed in like at all. You saw all of 6 touches for Elijah Dotson there in that spot. Isaiah Spiller, you saw all of 1 touch for him. So it's going to be Joshua Kelly for me as a priority from the Charger side going up against a Vikings defense that has no business stopping the run. 166 rushing yards per game through 2. They saw DeAndre Swift just run all over their souls last week. And I don't think that that's going to be an outlier thing for these Minnesota Vikings. Keenan Allen, huge target share. Mike Williams getting back into the fray. 13 targets for him. You got to love getting to those pieces. I think it's disappointing seeing Gerald Everett just receive 6 targets in a Kellen Moore offense now through 2 weeks. So I'd say that he's probably the one guy that I'm not necessarily out on because it's a great game environment and maybe a path to getting different, but it's not going to shock anybody that the best 4 plays on the Charger side are Herbert along with some combination of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joshua Kelly. It's so easy because these guys are the ones who are on the field all the time. Quentin Johnson mixing in randomly, Joshua Palmer mixing in randomly, but unless they take a big play to the house, no real point in trying to make anything fancy here a priority. The Chargers are so easy to put together, and they're sitting in the largest total on the slate by far. So the Chargers side, pretty easy for me to put together.
Yeah, it is. I mean, now you've brought Cam Akers in too. I was going to be very heavy on Madison if this Akers thing never happened. I really was, because
I still think you should be, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think Akers is coming in and playing in an offense that he's familiar with and going to be able to get any kind of prominent work. I think you're going to see Cam Akers just kind of take over the Ty Chandler role. I mean, Ty Chandler just ripped to those best ball shares because he is gone. There's no point. He wasn't on the field to begin with. I bet he's inactive here in this spot. Maybe they keep him out there as some kind of an insurance policy, but it makes more sense to possibly have Myles Gaskin out there where he can at least have some kind of like a passing game role if they absolutely need it. But
I don't
Madison,
know how much I agree with that.
You think Akers is going to play a lot?
I'm not saying a lot, but Kevin O'Connell was the offensive coordinator for the Rams while Cam Akers was there.
That's true. That's true. I forgot that.
So I don't think this is just completely uncharted territory for Cam Akers. You know, like, you can't tell me he didn't bring anything over from the Rams.
No, that's true. That's true.
I'm not saying
it was in the back of my mind. I was saying more as like a generality because it's very rare that you have somebody like Baker Mayfield last season who had 2 days in the Rams building and then starts on a Thursday night against the Raiders. It was one of the more insane type things. Like that is like a 1 in a million type of a share there immediately. I mean, you got to get Cam Akers in the house, and there's going to be different blocking schemes, and there's going to be certain things that Kirk Cousins does that you didn't necessarily have Matthew Stafford or whomever else was playing quarterback. It was pretty much all Matt Stafford 2 seasons beforehand. He stayed pretty healthy during that run, but I got to feel as though Cam Akers, he can't necessarily be out there unless there's just a carbon copy deal where they are running that Rams offense. It feels pretty difficult for me to want to just randomly see Cam Akers or put him in for like 30-40% of snaps right from the get-go. Madison 5,800, if he's going to be unowned because of that, because we see Cam Akers active on Sunday and he's just ready to rock, Madison will be somebody who I think moves up my board.
Yeah, the Vikings have run the ball at a 22% clip so far this season. Dead last in the league by 5%. This scares me. If Akers is not active, then I think I understand what you're saying. I get the logic there. My issue is that if Akers even sees 6 touches, is there enough for Alexander Madison on a team that refuses to run the football? Granted, they've gone behind early And you know, the offense has not functioned well when they're trying to lean on the ground. And Madison fumbled twice on Thursday. Go Birds. But it's tough. I don't know.
I mean, we were down big time early
I know. I'm
that
saying
game,
they couldn't.
Yeah.
But this could be a shootout too.
And Tampa Bay's a run funnel. So I think there's a pass funnel where they just completely shut down the run. You saw them give up 73 yards there to the Vikings in week 1, a game you and I were both on the over of for these very reasons. But now you've gone from a 46 total, the Vikings total closed around 50. This is a 54-point total where you're trying to build out game stacks. And it should be something that you are very ownership dependent on, but also there's just so much to go around for the Vikings here in this spot. So we'll see if Cam Akers is active. That's going to add a huge wrinkle. It's nice that this game is in the early set where you're going to have that information. We're going to be able to play with our cards up. It's not waiting in the wings for a 4:25 start time where then late swap would have to be a huge part of what you're doing, maybe hitting eject on Madison. But it's too good of a game environment to say that I wouldn't have the featured back for Minnesota against the Chargers, at least in play for me.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, I look, KJ Osborne's a great play at 4K as well. I prefer him over Jordan Addison by a mile personally. What's ownership look like? As a matter of fact, I haven't looked at our updated ownership on these guys yet.
Yeah, so we're looking at Justin Jefferson. I mean, this is going to be just
I'm saying what do Osborne and Addison look like?
Yeah, so right now we've got Osborne sitting at 6.9%, Jordan Addison 1.5%, and that's correct. I know Jordan Addison's had more of the upside. KJ Osborne running way more routes, been way more functional within this offense. The only team in the NFL where only 3 wide receivers have ran a route. We haven't had Jalen Naylor on the field. Yeah. We haven't had Brandon Powell on the field. It is insane. It is so specific, just Jefferson, Addison, Osborne, and then, of course, tight end position, a huge part of what Minnesota's been doing with TJ Hawkinson. But it is insane how concentrated this target share is to the wide receiver core. And KJ Osborne, he's on the field a lot. I don't think that's going underlooked, though, based on where we have the projections. The weird thing to me is Jordan Addison's 5,500 on this slate. He's just a contrarian piece to get to. He's going to need a lot of big playability here because it seems like Osborne is going to be the guy who's just out on the field more.
I'm with you. He's playing almost every snap of the damn game.
Yeah.
You know, Addison's basically hit his ceiling in these 2 games based on playing time. Almost at 100 thumbs up too. Appreciate you guys. I know it's a long show, but we're really trying to nail down everything and not leave you hanging wondering, why didn't they talk about this? If we're going to do a matchup show, we're going to do our best to make sure we do it right. Wrap this up. Best favorite way, and do this, somewhat quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite way to play this game? Because you know how popular it's going to be.
Right now, it's going to be Justin Herbert because he is 1/5 the ownership of Kirk Cousins. I think I would be leaning on that side of the ball going up against the Vikings and trying to force in some Allen Williams or, going to Joshua Kelly 5,400 in addition to one of those pass catchers and then have Justin Jefferson or KJ Osborne as the run back. I think salary-wise, that's going to be the thing that makes the most sense. It's pretty difficult, I think, with Kirk Cousins to go Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and not feel good about your lineup. But I think that's going to be the preferred way most people go about building this game script. You can then try to force in a cheap RB there in Joshua Kelly, 5,400, and make that your run back in some of those situations. Even Mike Williams at 6K is doable there for it. But considering the ownership of Cousins, highest owned quarterback we have on the slate by far. I know we're throwing at 80% of the time. I know that we have Alexander Madison non-existent, Cam Akers coming in for a reason, but I still got to take Justin Herbert in this game environment on the road at 1/5 of the ownership here.
Got it. 3 games to go. We got 3 games left.
Yes.
Carolina, Seattle. Bryce Young not practicing with the ankle. Miles Sanders limited. Neil and I went over this yesterday. I got to tell you, I was really excited for Miles Sanders early in that game because I had a good amount of him and he was getting all of the work. So I'm going, hey, the volume here. I don't expect you to be efficient against this Saints defensive front. Just get the volume, get the targets. And then where Miles Sanders really could have been valuable late in that game, final 3 minutes, we'll call it a 2-minute drill because that's what they were doing.
Of course,
it was all Chuba Hubbard. It was all Chuba. Am I wrong though?
It sucked.
Chuba Hubbard wasn't out there at all. And when he wasn't featured or even used. And then everything went to Hubbard in that last drive. That's not something I love to see. Is it possible? I haven't seen this, but is it possible? I was wondering, like, did Miles Sanders get banged up? So that was it? Or do they just not like him there? I lean towards they don't like him there. And I'll tell you why. Last year, Miles Sanders had a great season in Philly, double-digit touchdowns, big-time rushing yards. Do you know who was featured as the 2-minute drill back every single time?
Kenny
Gainwell.
Oh, it was Kenny. It was one of the two.
Yeah, right. But it wasn't Sanders. So does Frank Reich know something? Remember, Frank Reich coming from the Philadelphia organization, Super Bowl winning coach in 2018 with them, obviously before Sanders, but you get the point. Do they know something about Sanders that they don't want to use him there? That would kind of suck.
It would really suck, but here's at least the encouraging part. You saw no passing game involvement for him in that 2022 season, pretty much not since his rookie season where he had 63 targets. It's been dwindling down. And part of that is personnel. You have a Boston Scott, you have a Kenneth Gainwell, you have, some guys who I think are more inclined to be those kind of pass catching backs. And, you're out there with last season, just a juggernaut of an offense, a juggernaut of an offensive line. Everybody's going to look good, but 26 targets over the course of 2022 in 17 games active there. He's already at 11 targets. He's already like nearly halfway there. So if you're playing a PPR site like DraftKings, if you're playing PPR for your home leagues, if you're doing anything of that nature, it's at least encouraging that he's going to be involved in that capacity and he's going to be out there. It's going to be tough at 5,700 where you need to get in the box and you need to run into some of those touchdowns. If he's not going to be in there in 2-minute drills in games like this against Seattle, where you assume they're going to be playing from behind, that's really worrisome. And maybe we should have some kind of interest in Hubbard as a result, but he's 5,100.
Oh, I don't want to play Hubbard.
Really thin. That. Yeah, I'm saying, but if he wasn't banged up, I don't think there was any kind of like a transition over there. For me, it's just simply Miles Sanders. Yes, there's more passing game involvement for him this time around. So there's at least some appeal that exists there, but Carolina is so bad and Bryce Young has not looked good. CJ Stroud weirdly looking better than Bryce Young to me. I did not expect that, but I'm going to pretty much be hitting nothing on the Carolina side.
But that's kind of my point is I feel like I need all of the work from Miles Sanders because the touchdown equity is so low.
Agreed.
He's better in the passing game when they run him on wheel routes and stuff. I've seen that many years from him. He's not great when you're just targeting him short passes out of the backfield. But
last thing, 27.3% success rate in terms of what we're seeing right now out of him. That's his career low. And I think it can't be understated how good that Philadelphia offensive line is and how good it's going to make anybody look within that Philadelphia Eagles offense. And now you put him into Carolina, but success rate is basically when you get a reception and you're able to like transition that into like 40% first down. There's a whole equation towards it, but he was at 46.2% last season with no efficiency. So he's been very inefficient as a pass catcher as well. Lots of concern that you should have here for Miles Sanders. I don't think this is the week that we need to force it in.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm good on if you wanted to go to some Hayden Hurst or some Adam Thielen. I actually don't think it's crazy because Seattle's pass defense has been bad. That defense in general has been really bad with Matthew Stafford first and then Jared Goff. I don't hate Seattle stacks with a run back, and Carolina's defenses look good. But again, I'm also not convinced after facing, Atlanta, they don't throw the football. And then you faced New Orleans Saints. I'm still not a believer in Dennis Allen and Derek Carr just yet. I'm really not. We'll see how that materializes. Geno Smith has the highest adjusted completion rating in the league through the first 2 weeks. Geno Smith looked awesome last week. DK Metcalf, assuming he's healthy, they got some guys here. I have no problem, even with Carolina being, I think, an above average defense. Seattle at home, 6-point favorites. I want some pieces of this team, especially if they're not going to be super popular.
Yeah, Kenneth Gainwell, we were just talking about it. Kenneth Walker, my favorite play probably from the Seattle side at 6,200. I saw some people talking about him in chat. I didn't know what Zach Charbonnet's role was going to be here, but you get the goal line touches. You get 29 touches now through 2 weeks, and they were in come from behind script there too against Detroit. That was a really exciting football game. I think we're going to see much better running efficiency from him, and that's kind of the main point for me. 17 attempts, only 43 yards there against Detroit. Maybe they just have the run-stopping defense here this season. I mean, Detroit's been outperforming expectations for me defensively, even though you saw some passing game volume, and Geno Smith did play awesome. There's no question about that. Looking at doubles, paying attention to Metcalf here, who didn't practice Wednesday, but I think he'll be fine to go. He ended up getting x-rayed during that game, I believe it was, where he ended up leaving a little bit early. Would have been an absolute nuke smash had he stayed out there. So I think he's coming in a little bit underlooked there. But him, Lockett, they're the easiest two guys to pair with a quarterback ever. You know it's going to be all of them. Kenneth Walker, though, I think independent just because of Carolina on the other side of this one, they're going to be hemorrhaging yards on the ground. 132 now through 2 games this season, 25th in the league. Give me Kenneth Walker.
I like it. I don't mind the Geno Smith, DK, or Lockett. You want to throw some of those guys in there. We have DK at 4% right now, Lockett around 9% at a pretty decent price point. Dallas and Arizona is one of these games where I just simply do not know how I'm not going to get a lot of Tony Pollard.
I'm going to get a lot of Tony Pollard and a lot of James Conner.
I'm probably good on Conner if he's double-digit owned.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true.
You might listen. Hey, James Conner was great last week. He's one of the only offensive weapons they really have. There's no way Joshua Dobbs excels like he did against the Giants in this matchup against the Cowboys. You want to go to Conner? I get it. Personally, I have a real affinity for going Tony Pollard and paying up for Cowboys defense in the same lineup.
I do not mind that at all. It's such a good spot for the Dallas defense. There's no doubt about it. This Arizona team is incompetent on the offensive end. You saw them go nuts against the Giants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that was a whole thing. James Conner, my God, though, he's getting all of the work again. And this was one of those things from last season. I was like, yeah, I understand James Conner. Whether he's good or not, whether this team is good or not, it doesn't really matter when somebody's playing this amount of snaps. Like it just doesn't. 23 carries, didn't even receive a reception because it was such a positive game script for them, for James Conner to just run into the back of the offensive line for however many times in the second half. Didn't put the foot down at all. Giants come back, ridiculous football game. James Conner is going to get involved in the passing game in these spots where they're going to be down pretty heavily early. So James Conner, it's simply contrarian towards getting away from some of the Dallas defense builds with Tony Pollard and things of that nature. But as you said, it's all Tony Pollard. How do you not get to him here at 8K? I don't really care. Highest touchdown equity out of anybody at the running back position this week.
Yep, absolutely. Especially with Eckler not expected to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just looks good. Plus, you're talking about red zone stats. Yes, I care very much about that. Tony Pollard, 16 red zone rushing attempts through his first 2 games. This will blow your mind. 12 inside the 10, 7 inside the 5. That is okay. The next
2 games.
2 games. The next closest player is Swift, and this is equally amazing because Swift didn't touch the ball basically in week 1. Swift has 6 inside the 10, 3 inside the 5, 7 inside the 20, and that was basically all in one game. I'm sorry to bring this up, but
fine. Just I hate myself. It's fine.
He looked awesome though.
He was incredible. How bad is our defense?
Tony Pollard, 7 goal line carries in 2 games. And hey, you could be like, yeah, but he faced bad teams. Okay, who's he got in week 3? Got the Cardinals in week 3. 12.5-point favorites. If Tony Pollard lets me down, so be it. I mentioned the pick on Prize Picks where you're getting 100% deposit bonus. You're getting the free month of Odd Shopper Premium, and you're getting a Tony Pollard touchdown prop over a half a touchdown, passing, rushing, or receiving at -140. Come on now. Or I'm sorry, it's -140, it's 160. I saw 180 or 190 out there. It's no juice on Prize Picks. Give me Tony Pollard. He is currently my favorite running back on the slate.
Agreed. 48 touches. 48 touches. That's outperforming guys like Christian McCaffrey. He is the league leader in touches right now. He is in the best possible spot. He is just, it's weird to say 8K he's underpriced. That's probably not the right way of looking at it, but he's the guy at the running back position who could just set the world on fire, and he's pulling 15.3% ownership. Nothing egregious by any counts. Jerome Ford, I mean, if you're going to be isolating him out of your builds like me, I'm going to be running into Tony Pollard. Spending up at running back going to be a preferred way I do things with him. Bijan Robinson this week. And then getting to that mid-range, peppering it with like the Travis Etiennes, the Kenneth Walkers, and some of those stacks.
Thanks, Shark Killer. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for you guys hanging out. I know it's a long show. So I want to get out of here before the 2-hour mark, right? We're fine. But just wrap this Dallas-Arizona game up for me. Less on the Arizona side and more how, since we love Pollard and Cowboys D even paying up makes sense. How are you approaching the passing game? Then we'll wrap this up with the Bears and Chiefs.
Yeah, I think the passing game might go a little bit overlooked when you talk about CeeDee Lamb. 13.7% ownership, but like 13 targets coming off of a week one that you should build nothing out of. It was the most ridiculous game script, 40-0, in addition to weather. You had pouring rain the entire time. You put the kitty gloves on Dak Prescott, you run into the line, you just get that game over with. Same thing with Tony Pollard. I really don't look at anything from week one as indicative of what we'll see. Week two, a lot more indicative at home against a really good Jets offense. 13 targets, really good stuff to see if you're a CeeDee Lamb shareholder. Paying attention to the Brandon Cooks injury status, sounds like he's trending towards playing. He practiced here today. That news just ended up dropping while we were on this show 20 minutes ago. So that's encouraging to see for his outlook. I think that takes a little bit off the top of trying to force in Jake Ferguson, who led week one in terms of expected fantasy points, pretty much everywhere. Anybody who's projecting out expected fantasy points, Jake Ferguson. Rapid City, South Dakota, shouted out for my guy, 3,600. Not a bad tight end play to involve in a stack where you just say, onslaught. I don't even need a run back from Arizona. You just go Pollard with Dak, with Lamb, with Ferguson, and you just say fatality to finish it out.
Yeah, I'm with you. Josh said he hasn't paid off 8K yet, Tony Pollard. Yeah, I guess you could technically say that's true, but at the same time, the Giants, he would have easily paid it off if they didn't throw Deuce Vaughn out there. If they weren't just throwing all of their backups out there, then he would have clearly paid that off. But it was Dowdle and it was Deuce Vaughn to close out that game. And last week, listen, the Jets got smoked, but that defense is still really good on the ground. So 7 of 8.
We can only project touches and what the running back does with those touches and how they're schemed in the offense. So I get that 8K, you're looking at it as a points per dollar thing. Like cash, we can have a conversation about whether or not that's something that's worth it. Jerome Ford, as much as I won't be playing him in tournaments, he's obviously a cash game play. There's really no doubt. 4,800. Yes, Tennessee is stifling. Yes, it's difficult, but like he's a $4,800 running back that gets you stuff elsewhere in your lineup. I just think that at 8K, he is a phenomenal ceiling type play who has 30, 35 point upside based on his touches, 48, leading the NFL, leading above guys like Christian McCaffrey, who played 100% of snaps in week 2. We're talking a ridiculous workload for Tony Pollard, one of the better offensive lines in football, and the opportunity against a terrible Arizona team. In terms of projecting out those things, the things that are known variables that we can do with information, he's going to bust big plays at some point in time. It's just going to happen. Why not get the guys who have more opportunity rather than the guys who have less?
Right. He's the clear guy in Dallas, and that's all I care about. If he ends up sucking and not scoring, but gets all of the touches in the backfield, then we've done our job. You can't ask for, you can't make him score, but the volume, like you said, is what you're projecting, and relative efficiency. But we know he's good, and we know that offensive line is good, and we know the Cardinals stink. All right, let's wrap this up. Chicago and Kansas City, and for all of you guys with us, remember the stochastic avatar. If you're not using that on FanDuel or DraftKings or Owner's Box and all of them, and then you don't want to get a free month of stochastic plot. You don't want to get, put it this way. Now we've changed it to where if you finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more rocking the avatar, just go to stochastic.com/avatar. It's in the description too. Totally free. There's no strings attached to this. Use it wherever it is you play. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Doesn't matter the contest. You could enter for a nickel and finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Just don't chop with 3 or more people, because then we lose the business. You're getting a month of your choosing of anything up to $200 value. Plus you get inducted into the wonderful Hall of Fame segment that we do, the induction ceremony every Sunday. We're doing that between Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock. Jordan and I record that each week and showcase all of your wins. Just tweet your wins to us. It's Stochastic HOF, Stochastic Hall of Fame. Include Eric and myself too, because we love seeing this stuff. If you're rocking that avatar, you finish top 3, field of 5,000 or more, $200 value and inducted into the Hall of Fame. Proud moment for everybody. We get to show it off for you. Win-win here. So make sure you're rocking that wherever it is. All right. Mooney's questionable, limited practice. We'll see what happens with him. Chicago, I mean, there's real, if this thing, and you know, people, there's a lot of rumors and everything going on with Alan Williams, and people are like, oh, it's his health. I'll say one thing. There's no way it's his health if the Bears organization refuses to speak on anything. There's always some truth to everything. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle oftentimes, but there's no doubt that it seems like there's serious turmoil right now within this organization based around what happened with him. Like, they refuse to speak on this. Something weird's going on. Does that mean it affects their play on Sunday? Maybe not. I have no clue, but it could. And they're already 12.5-point dogs, so who really gives a shit, right? I refuse to believe as well that Kansas City's offense continues to be as lackluster as they've been. Their defense, however, has kind of gone overshadowed because the offense has struggled. They held the Lions to 14 offensive points. They held Jacksonville to 9 points. Chris Jones came back and was immediately dominant despite being on a pitch count. So, I mean, I get why they're 12.5-point favorites. The way I'm playing this is, yes, I'm going to take some shots on the Sky Moores and the Tonys, assuming he plays. I'm going to take shots on some of these guys that aren't named Travis Kelce, but I do want some Kansas City here with how bad the Chicago team has looked. And then their defensive coordinator just resigned yesterday. I want some Kansas City, even if it's expensive.
Yeah, and it could get even better if Isaiah Pacheco ends up sitting. I'm going to be paying very close attention to the practice report because this could be Jerick McKinnon unlocked going up against Chicago here. We know what a prominent piece he can be in the passing game as well. Going to have to pay very close attention to that. Considering it's a hamstring, I'm a little bit more on high alert for it than otherwise. You've had CEH who has started some of these games. He had all of 1 carry last week. Jerick McKinnon, if he ends up being out, you're probably going to see LaMichael Pirine activated or Deneric Prince end up activated here as well, who got picked up off the practice squad. So something to pay attention to there. Jerick McKinnon could end up being your featured secondary piece to Travis Kelce here for me. Kadarius Toney, don't mind that shout out here at all. Patrick Mahomes, you're just going to have to stack him up unique ways all the time because of how spread out the ball is to everybody there on Kansas City. You didn't get the super ceiling from him last time out, but starting to add a little bit in terms of rushing. He's had 6 and 7 rushing attempts in the first 2 weeks. Not something that you necessarily want your star quarterback to do, but the guy just got paid. He threw for over 300 against Jacksonville, still put up 25 without more than 2 touchdown passes. There's not a lot of guys that are going to do that on a weekly basis here for Kansas City. So no doubt about it. He's somebody that is probably going to end up a little bit under-owned relative to what that ceiling is because he hasn't done it for people yet. We have him at 12.7% ownership. I'd actually be surprised if that ended up being the case. Chicago, we'll talk about them to finish it out, but pretty hard to figure out a run back for them.
Yes, it is very tough. And Marcos mentioned that they could be down, they're going to be down 2 linemen as well. Yeah, I think they just are placing one of them on IR. I forget who it was. It doesn't look good. They're in trouble, man. This team's in trouble. The only thing here is this Fields just run a ton, and he might have to. I just don't know if that's going to be enough. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's going to be enough. And it's not as far as winning, but is it going to be, what I'm saying is it going to be enough from a fantasy perspective for Justin Fields?
Yeah. So when I say it's difficult for me, I think there's only one guy I want to run it back with from Chicago. And I think it's probably the guy everybody does. I'm looking at DJ Moore, who's just made terrible quarterbacks look good his entire career. You even saw last week against Tampa Bay, 7 for 6, 104, 19.4 fantasy points, still sitting at a reasonable 5,700. And considering nobody outside of Mahomes and Kelce are expensive on the Kansas City side, whether it's McKinnon, Kadarius Toney, MVS, whomever else you might want to play from the Kansas City side, pretty easy to slot a $5,700 DJ Moore into the mix. I don't want Claypool. I don't want Kmet. I really don't want anybody else there. It's pretty much DJ Moore or bust.
Gotcha. Favorite way to play the Chiefs, and we'll close it with this. This is an important question.
Probably going to be for me the chalky way of Mahomes and Kelsey, dependent on Pacheco news. If Pacheco's out, you are going to see McKinnon get some attention, but I would immediately turn that into a double because of what that role can be for Jerick McKinnon. Would almost be forced into duty to have more carries, and he's not exempt from that. We saw him carry the ball 11 times against Jacksonville back in the playoffs last season, 10 times in week 15 against Houston with a limited backfield. So there are scenarios where he gets double-digit touches on the ground to really add to that receiving portfolio, but let's be serious. You're playing Jerick McKinnon for what he could potentially do in the passing game.
I get it. I like Pacheco too, assuming he's active.
Yep.
There's a very realistic possibility that Pacheco, this is the game where he had, assuming he's good to go, I think there's no reason to believe he won't be. Pacheco could have himself a game. And I'll tell you what, there are quite a bit of discount running backs. I think you could see pretty spread out ownership for a lot of these guys this week. And Pacheco, what do we have him at ownership wise? Can't be high.
Nothing. I'll pull it up here to round it out. He is at 11.1%, which is actually much higher than I was expecting it to be. 1.1% for Jerick McKinnon. There's going to be some balancing act that's going on there. We'll pay attention to that news.
I'd still play Pacheco around 10%, though.
I would too.
12.5-point favorites.
There are 6-7 touchdowns there for Kansas City just waiting in the wings.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. They have a 30-point implied total. So
4+.
Yeah. Right. And that's just what the total is. If they scored 40+, nobody would be surprised. Hey, go follow Eric on the X at Eric Lindquist. Follow me at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. Appreciate you guys hanging as always. You're the best. Shout out to Jordan Klein for producing this one. Links to everything, guys. The lineup generator promo, great tool. $9.99 for the first week. Prize picks, deposit bonus, plus just an awesome format. Not to mention everything at Odd Shopper Plus Premium for a month for free. Everything's down there. If you want anything, we got you covered. Great deals. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow, and then Saturday, and then Sunday. It's a long haul, but we're done, and I appreciate you hanging with us. We'll see you back here next time. Peace.